Welcome to Wealth and Means. Advice dressed up like hard work.
Each week, we explore ideas that help you pause, reflect, and think more deeply about the opportunities all around you.
It's the perfect mix. A little information, a few stats, some real-world insights, and just enough deep talk to make you feel smarter before your second cup of coffee.
Today's episode moves fast through what you didn't see in the news. From brain rot factories and penguin memes to wearable AI and defensive stock trades, tracing how attention actually moves when nobody's watching. Then we slow it down with Wake Up Ready, walking the week ahead from factory orders to Fed signals. After that, a knowledge bomb that goes back 2,000 years to unpack what wealth and means really meant before dashboards flattened it, followed by Humor Me, where financial optimization turns into identity management and performance art. Then, the greater debate, where Carnegie and Rockefeller face off over how to tax dividends. And finally, let's invent again, with the quiet chemistry that made modern networks possible, stacked end to end, asking one question: what actually lasts?
A quick thank you to our sponsor, Nost Moments at nostmoments.io. Share your most precious memories. Share the Nost Moments. All right, if you felt like the week's headlines were basically one loud argument on repeat, here's the antidote. This is what you didn't see in the news. The smaller signals that moved fast, popped in weird places, and tell you something about where attention is actually flowing. Let's start with the internet's newest factory line. Steal a brain rot. Live streams. What looks like chaos is actually a production system. The core fact is that brain rot isn't just a meme, it's a repeatable setup. Go live, promise giveaways, lean into absurdity, and let the comments do half the work. What matters here is that when formats become standardized, creativity gets replaced by scale. You get copycats, moderation fights, and scam accusations almost automatically. This showed up this week because the format crossed a visibility threshold, and creators rushed in while the returns were still high. It's franchising, just without the paperwork. That logic carries straight into the platform layer. Pine, ByteDance's photo-first experiment, and the surrounding Pine drama chatter quietly picked up steam. The key fact is that new posting surfaces create temporary distribution arbitrage. Early users get reach before the feed gets crowded. Why it matters is that these windows reshape creator income faster than almost any policy change. People reorganize their workflow overnight. It surfaced this week because creator forums and growth channels amplify these shifts long before the press does. From platform shifts to subcultures, #Fursuit Friday. It's one of those quirky subculture trends that never quite disappears. The fact is, it spikes reliably and spreads through images more than text. In this case, furries, animal character enthusiasts who dress up in fur costumes. What's important is that these rituals stabilize online communities. They give people something to gather around without needing coordination. It's durable attention. It showed up this week because recurrence itself is the trigger. Algorithms love predictable bursts. Now entertainment, where attention moves in waves. Invincible Season 4's trailer didn't just get views, it generated language. Viltrumite started trending alongside it. The key fact is that franchise launches now produce vocabularies, shorthand that fans use to signal belonging. Why that matters is that once a term trends, it becomes fuel for explainers, memes, and reaction edits. It stretches the life of the launch. It surged this week because trailer cycles follow a tight script: release, react, remix, debate, usually inside 72 hours.
You don't just watch the show, you learn the dialect.
In the same lane, Supergirl, blast off. It's not at peak hype yet, and that's the point. The fact is, it's in that middle zone, past the core fans, not yet universal. This is where tone and narrative get negotiated in public. Is it a reboot, a reset, a pivot? That conversation shapes expectations before release. It moved this week because short promos are designed for fast sharing, and creators jumped on it early. March.
Pre-arguments are now part of the marketing budget.
Gaming follows a similar rhythm. The Forza Horizon 6 teaser hit and triggered the usual second wave. The basic fact is that trailers quickly turn into analysis. Specs, features, upgrade advice. What matters is that games don't just sell entertainment, they sell hardware cycles. Attention shifts from "that looks fun" to Do I need a new console? It accelerated this week because teaser drops are algorithmic green lights for breakdown channels. Let's talk personal tech. Is it bad to never restart your PC? Sounds trivial. It isn't. The fact is, these micro-explainers are among the most shareable content online. Everyone relates. Nobody wants to admit confusion. Why it matters is that they build trust funnels. One useful tip turns into a long-term audience. It popped this week because the format is perfect for shorts and reposts. Short, definitive, universal.
The digital equivalent of drink more water.
Then there's Apple AI Pin, another round in the wearable AI cycle. The key fact is the attention is on form factor, not features. People are searching for what an AI device looks like when it leaves the phone. Why that matters is that body-worn assistants reopen privacy, etiquette, and surveillance debates. They change how always-on feels. It spiked this week after renewed speculation and creator commentary. Antarctica quietly became one of the busiest places on the internet this week. Searches and social traffic around Antarctica surged between January 18th and 24th, and it wasn't driven by a single headline. It was a pileup of very different stories. The first trigger was cultural. A 2007 clip of a lone penguin walking away from its colony toward the mountains went viral again and got labeled Nihilist Penguin. It spread across Instagram and X as a kind of existential meme, people projecting burnout and resignation onto this tiny animal. That alone was enough to spike curiosity.
It became a shorthand for how people were feeling.
Exactly. On top of that, scientists revealed maps of a 34-million-year-old landscape buried beneath the East Antarctic ice sheet. River valleys, ridges, terrain that hasn't seen sunlight since before humans existed. That fed into the hidden world narrative that always performs well online. And NASA added another layer. On January 23rd, its Antarctic balloon fleet flew 4 missions simultaneously to study dark matter. Antarctica trended because culture, space research, and cute penguins all collided at once.
It became a rare moment where entertainment and science overlapped.
Global sports now, T20 World Cup 2026 searches jumped. The fact is, major tournaments heat up long before kickoff, around venues, schedules, and politics. Why it matters is that cricket attention is commercial gravity. Ads, media rights, diaspora engagement. It builds slowly and lasts. It rose this week because early announcements restarted the conversation.
Billions of eyeballs, 0 U.S. headlines.
Pakistan's squad selection followed the same logic. The basic fact: roster decisions create arguments. Arguments create engagement. Why it matters is that selection debates power weeks of content, analysis, leaks, counterfactuals. It surged this week because decisions are time-bound attention triggers.
Sports as procedural drama.
From sports to sound. One of the more technical search trends this week was around semantic hearing and advanced noise cancellation, sometimes described as sound bubbles. The key fact is that new systems from research labs and startups like Hirvana are trying to isolate specific voices in crowded environments, not just mute background noise. You don't just hear less, you hear selectively. Why that matters is that this changes how people experience offices, transit, and public spaces. If your headphones can decide what deserves your attention, that reshapes social interaction and even workplace norms. It popped this week because recent tech newsletters, including Top Tech Tidbits, resurfaced early January research, pushing a niche term into wider circulation.
It's another step toward personalized reality.
Closely related is rising interest in stretchable OLEDs and wearable displays, screens embedded directly into fabric. The key fact is that January tech digests framed these not as distant lab projects, but as early commercial categories. Displays that bend, stretch, and integrate into clothing are moving from prototypes toward products. Why it matters is that this blurs the line between electronics and apparel. Clothing becomes an interface. That affects fashion, health monitoring, advertising, and privacy all at once. It moved this week because renewed January coverage encouraged early adopters and designers to start searching and experimenting again. Finally, let's talk about what retail investors were actually watching this week. On StockTwits, the most discussed names weren't flashy AI plays or meme stocks. They were Waste Management, CSX, Stryker, Oatly, and the Invesco Small Cap Consumer Staples ETF. The key fact is that this list is heavily tilted toward defensive, cash flow stable businesses. Trash collection, railroads, medical devices, packaged food, and a basket of staple companies. These are businesses built around things people keep paying for, regardless of the economic mood. Why that matters is that this kind of clustering usually signals a shift in investor psychology. When attention moves toward infrastructure, healthcare, and everyday consumption, it often reflects a desire for durability over upside. It's less about chasing the next big theme and more about protecting capital and preserving optionality. This popped this week because uncertainty is stacking up. Rates, growth expectations, geopolitics, earnings risk, and retail investors are reacting in real time. Instead of rotating into another hype cycle, they're gravitating toward companies that feel predictable.
It suggests a preference for stability over storytelling.
Now let's wake up ready. Monday, January 26th. The week opens at 8:30 Eastern with durable goods orders. This is where corporate optimism meets reality. Machines, vehicles, factory gear, and tech hardware. Are companies actually committing capital or quietly protecting cash? The real signal sits in core capital goods. That is long-term investment, stripped of noise. If this comes in strong, it reinforces the higher for longer rates story. Cyclicals benefit, bond yields drift up, and growth stocks feel pressure. If it disappoints, yields soften, tech gets breathing room, and recession chatter picks up.
This is where all the AI spending talk gets tested, right?
Exactly. This is purchase orders versus pitch decks. Later in the morning, the Dallas Fed Manufacturing Survey adds texture about what factories are seeing on the ground. Then earnings arrive. Nucor and Steel Dynamics report. Steel is an early cycle signal. Their guidance tells you whether industrial demand is stabilizing or still eroding. In energy, the API Exploration and Production Conference runs all week in Austin. It is where standards and capital spending priorities get shaped, and headlines tend to leak out quietly. Globally, Epiroc reports, which acts as a proxy for mining investment worldwide. Monday closes with one theme: is real investment reawakening or retrenching?
The focus shifts from boardrooms to households on Tuesday.
At 10 a.m., consumer confidence arrives. This captures how people feel about jobs, income, and security. Strong readings support retail, travel, and service stocks. Weakness pushes money toward defensives and bonds. At the same time, we get new home sales and regional Fed surveys. That gives us housing and construction on one side and regional manufacturing on the other. Together, they show whether higher rates are still biting. The Fed meeting also begins. There are no headlines yet, but positioning starts immediately. There's also a 5-year Treasury auction, a key test of demand in the middle of the yield curve. Weak bidding here usually shows up quickly in higher yields. Earnings are heavy. Boeing, UPS, Texas Instruments, and Microsoft all report. Transportation, chips, cloud, and logistics in one cluster. If guidance is cautious across this group, it is hard to ignore. Tuesday ends with markets leaning forward. Wednesday. This is the center of gravity for the week. The day starts at 8:30 with another durable goods reading. It is one last look at business momentum before policy hits. At 2 p.m. comes the Fed decision. At 2:30, Powell speaks. Rates are expected to stay put, so everything hinges on tone. How comfortable they sound with inflation, how concerned they are about growth, and how much flexibility they want to preserve. One shift in language can reset expectations for months. Hawkish nuance pushes yields up and pressures growth stocks. Dovish signals ignite risk assets and weaken the dollar.
And markets still trust Powell's voice more than the statement.
Every time. Mid-morning brings the EIA inventory report. Crude, gasoline, and distillates move oil quickly. Big draws lift prices and energy equities. Big builds weigh on both. Then earnings roll in. Meta, Tesla, and IBM report ads, EVs, and enterprise tech in one sweep. Meta reflects corporate marketing budgets. Tesla reflects consumer durability and margins. IBM reflects enterprise spending. Together, they sketch the real growth picture. Globally, the Bank of Canada announces its rate decision. It is a read-through for North American demand and commodity exposure. Surprises move the Canadian dollar and ripple south. Thursday tests whether Wednesday made sense. At 8:30, jobless claims arrive, offering a live feed on layoffs and labor stress. Then come personal income and PCE inflation, the Fed's preferred inflation gauge. If inflation cools meaningfully, it validates patience. If it stays hot, credibility gets questioned. There's also a 7-year Treasury auction. This is where duration demand gets exposed. Soft demand means higher term premiums. Then the earnings spotlight takes over. After the close, Apple, MasterCard, Comcast, Caterpillar, and Honeywell report. Consumer hardware, payments, media, heavy industry, and automation all in one night. Apple alone can move global indexes, especially through China exposure, services growth, and upgrade cycles. Caterpillar and Honeywell tell you whether infrastructure and automation spending are accelerating. Friday, the week winds down, but signals still matter. The morning brings final labor and sentiment reads for January. Early afternoon brings the Baker Hughes rig count. How aggressively producers are drilling today shapes supply 6 months from now. Rising rigs pressure prices later. Falling rigs support the curve. Energy traders watch this closely. Then earnings close it out. Exxon, Chevron, Verizon, and American Express report. The oil majors reveal cash flow discipline and capital spending intentions. American Express reveals how affluent consumers and credit quality are holding up. Rising delinquencies would ripple through financials. Strong spending supports risk appetite. That's the week, and you are wake up ready.
Today's knowledge bomb hits close to home. Most people hear wealth and means and think it's just an old-fashioned way of saying rich. It's not. It's one of the oldest ideas in economic history, and it's sharper than most modern money advice. Go back to Aristotle 2,400 years ago. He says very plainly, wealth isn't the goal, it's a tool. Money matters only because of what it lets you do. That's the original framework. Wealth is possession. Means is power. Having money is one thing. Having the ability to deploy it, open doors, buy time, move outcomes, that's something else entirely. Fast forward to 1605. Francis Bacon is writing about wealth and means, and he says, yes, money is useful for almost everything, but it's still secondary to discipline, skill, and mindset. Even then, they understood cash without capability is fragile. By the 1700s and 1800s, a man of wealth and means becomes shorthand for someone who doesn't just have assets. He has leverage, influence, optionality, shock absorbers. He can fund things, shape things, survive things. And across novels, courts, and politics, the phrase always means the same thing, not just what you own, what you can make happen. You see it everywhere, the same idea, resources plus agency equals power. Here's the punchline. Modern language flattened all of this. We say net worth, income, rich. And we think that tells the story. It doesn't. Two people can have the same money and completely different lives. One has skills, networks, time, credibility. The other has debt, stress, fragility, no leverage. Same wealth, different means. Real wealth isn't just accumulation. It's time you control. Skills you can monetize, networks you can activate, options when things break, freedom from forced choices. That's means. That's why living beyond your means isn't really about spending. It's about burning future freedom. And independent means isn't about being rich. It's about not being trapped, not being dependent, not being cornered. So when we say wealth and means, we're being precise. We're not talking about flexing. We're talking about building. Assets plus capability, capital plus control, money plus mastery. Because history is clear. Wealth without means disappears. Means without wealth is exhausting. But together, that's leverage, that's resilience, that's a designed life. That's the game.
You know what I've realized? Humor me. We live in the first era in history where everyone is simultaneously financially sophisticated and completely confused. Every adult you know has at least one spreadsheet, 3 budgeting apps, and 12 opinions about interest rates, and still checks their bank balance like it's a medical test. We've turned personal finance into this weird mix of science experiment and spiritual practice. People are like, I'm doing intermittent fasting, cold plunges, and dollar cost averaging. I don't know if I'm happy, but my dashboard looks incredible. And nobody says I'm rich anymore. Nobody. Now it's always, I'm comfortable. I'm fine. I'm good. Which is code for, I have money, but I've seen Instagram. And the content, oh my God. Finance content is now performance art. Every headline is, here's why you're already behind. 7 assets the rich are quietly buying. Quietly. Always quietly. Apparently, rich people only communicate through whispers and Substack. If this keeps going, in 10 years it'll be top 1% secret owning a chair. You're still standing, that's why you're poor. Wait, are chairs taxable? We've also built a moral hierarchy of money. Index funds virtuous. Crypto, how sinful. You're like, I made money in Nvidia. People around you, nice. I made money in Dogecoin. Then they're like, are you okay? Same dollars. Different reputation. It's a financial caste system. And I'm guilty too. I've absolutely gone. This purchase is irrational. But it's tax deductible emotionally. That's real now. Emotional depreciation schedules. Here's the truth. Modern finance isn't really about money. It's about narrative. Feeling responsible, feeling ahead, feeling not dumb. Money is just the scoreboard. And that's why everyone is exhausted. We're not managing portfolios. We're managing identities. So here's the button. In a world where everyone is optimizing everything, the real edge might be knowing what actually matters to you before you optimize the wrong thing really efficiently. That might be the highest return investment left.
Follow me. The lights dim just enough that you feel it before you see it. 2 lecterns a few feet apart, polished wood, simple microphones, a packed room, the low hum of expectation. This is the kind of debate that clears dinner tables, the kind that turns friendly group chats quiet. It always sounds simple. Are dividends undertaxed or are they double taxed? And then you try to answer it. And 10 minutes later, you're staring at the ceiling at 2 in the morning, wondering whether the tax code is a moral document or a spreadsheet with feelings. Welcome to the greater debate. Tonight, it's Andrew Carnegie on one side, not the library builder on the bronze plaque, the industrialist who made the money for those libraries. On the other side, John D. Rockefeller, not the monopoly villain from textbooks, the systems thinker, the man who understood scale, incentives, and how small distortions become big disasters. They nod to each other, respect, history, and then Carnegie steps forward. He doesn't raise his voice. He never needs to. He says dividends are not manna. They are not gifts from the sky. They are claims on social output. They are what's left after workers have worked, suppliers have supplied, roads have been used, courts have enforced contracts, and stability has been maintained. They are cash. They land in checking accounts. They buy houses. They fund retirements. And in this country, overwhelmingly, they land at the top. He says when a system taxes wages hard and equity lightly, people notice. They might not know the rates. They know the feeling. They know who feels squeezed and who feels insulated. Over time, that erodes consent. It turns prosperity into resentment. If we need to broaden the base, he says, dividends are a clean base. They're visible. They're hard to hide. They're concentrated. But he pauses and he adds, only if the corporate system makes sense. Only if we're not stacking penalties on the same dollar. Only if we're willing to fix the whole machine. A few murmurs, some nods. Rockefeller pauses and then leans in. He says a dividend is what survives the corporate tax. It is what remains after the state has already taken its share. Tax it again heavily, and you're not taxing income, you're penalizing a structure and you're penalizing the recipients. Capital is mobile, he says. It doesn't wave flags. It doesn't care about speeches. It goes where it's treated least badly. Punish equity and you don't get justice. You get leverage. You get debt. You get fragility. He says reform should reduce distortions, not intensify them. Less bias toward borrowing. Less incentive to hide inside pass-throughs. less gaming between corporate and non-corporate forms. The goal is neutrality, not optics. The room is quiet now. Carnegie comes back. He says, look at households. Look at how dividends show up. They feel like income. They pay bills. They fund lifestyles. We don't treat wages as special. We shouldn't pretend equity cash is metaphysical. If ordinary income is taxed, he says, equity income should not get a privileged lane by default. You can justify relief. You cannot justify invisibility. Rockefeller responds calmly. He says fairness is incomplete if you only look at the last mile. The corporate layer is real. It's paid. It's audited. It's enforced. If you ignore it, you miscount. Taxing dividends as ordinary income is double taxation. Then Rockefeller sharpens. He says, raise dividend rates and watch what happens. Companies borrow more. Interest is deductible. Dividends are not. You subsidize leverage. They stop paying dividends. They buy back stock. Same cash, different wrapper, less transparency. They reorganize. They become partnerships, LLCs, anything to escape. A high dividend tax, he says, is a stealth subsidy to financial engineering. You hear someone exhale hard. Carnegie doesn't flinch. He says those distortions already exist. We live in them. Reduced rates didn't cure them. They dulled the pain and left the disease. If distortions are the complaint, he says, then fix the system. Don't protect one stream and call it reform. Tax dividends more and use the money to cut corporate rates. Less profit shifting, more domestic investment, less hiding income abroad, more building at home. And then the line that lands. If you want neutrality, he says, don't romanticize dividends. Admit you're choosing who gets the discount. A low gasp, someone laughs nervously. Now it's about money. Carnegie says taxing dividends as ordinary income is understandable. People get it. It can fund small rate cuts that everyone feels, or corporate cuts that keep factories here. Either way, legitimacy improves. And yes, he says, it makes the system more progressive. That's not a bug, that's math. Rockefeller shakes his head slightly. He says revenue math lies by omission. People change behavior, capital reroutes, structures mutate. If you want competitiveness, cut corporate rates directly. Don't run it through households. If you want progressivity, enforce the base, close loopholes, don't weaken the engine of investment. Punishing capital formation is an expensive way to feel virtuous. Rockefeller advocates integration, credits for corporate taxes paid, deductions for dividends, different paths, same goal, tax capital once. This is the adult solution, he says, hard, boring, necessary. Carnegie smiles thinly. He says integration is beautiful on whiteboards, ugly in politics, foreign shareholders, pensions, preferences, lobbyists, revenue cliffs. He's not opposed, he's skeptical. If we can't do it cleanly, he says, ordinary income treatment is second best. It restores balance. It restores trust. Carnegie asks why. If double taxation is the problem, we tolerate debt deductibility that makes balance sheets brittle. Why not shift some burden to shareholders where the base is harder to flee? Rockefeller asks why, if fairness is sacred, tax the same profit twice instead of fixing the first layer. And yes, do you admit higher dividend taxes push buybacks and retentions, reducing transparency? Carnegie pauses, then he nods. Yes, that risk is real. And yes, higher rates can accelerate financial engineering. That's a weakness. Any blunt tool invites clever avoidance. Rockefeller nods in return. And he admits integration is politically fragile, easy to promise, hard to maintain, vulnerable to carve-outs. Silence, respect. They move to their final statements. Carnegie says a republic cannot run forever on a tax code people believe is rigged. Broaden the base, lower the rates, keep the peace. Rockefeller says penalize dividends and you don't punish wealth. You distort production. Fix the system, kill the debt bias, integrate. Blunt instruments leave shrapnel. They step back. No applause yet. People are thinking about capital and consent, between what works and what feels right. And that tension never resolves. It just shifts. And that is the greater debate.
Let's invent again. Field Winslow did not look like a man who would quietly reshape the physical backbone of modern communication. He grew up in West Rutland, Vermont, small town, modest beginnings. He went to Middlebury, then Cornell. He became a chemist, not a showman, not a visionary in the Silicon Valley sense. More like the kind of person who believed that if you stayed with a problem long enough, it would eventually tell you the truth. And for most of his career, the problem he stayed with was painfully unglamorous. How do you code a wire so it does not fall apart? That was the problem. Before the 1940s, the telephone system ran on lead, thick, heavy, toxic lead sheathing wrapped around copper cables. It worked, mostly. But it was expensive, it was cumbersome, it was hard to install. And as the country grew, as cities densified, as millions more people wanted phone service, that system started to creak. You could not scale a national network on something that heavy and that costly. Engineers knew this. Executives knew this. Everyone knew it. The question was what replaced it? Plastics looked like the obvious answer. Lightweight, cheap, easy to manufacture, easy to install. The future, right? Except they failed. Early plastic coatings cracked. They became brittle. Sunlight broke them down. Temperature swings destroyed them. Rain and heat and cold slowly turned them into dust. You would bury a cable, and a few years later, it would be unusable, which meant outages, repairs, replacement, endless cost. In theory, plastics were better. In reality, they were unreliable. And in infrastructure, unreliable is worse than expensive. This is where Winslow enters the story. Before Bell Labs, he had worked on the Manhattan Project. He had helped develop early fluoropolymers. He had been operating at the edge of materials science when it mattered most. He understood how molecules behaved under stress. He understood how chemistry turned into systems. So when he arrived at Bell Labs in 1945, he brought with him a deep intuition. Materials are not static. They age. They interact with the world. If you want reliability, you have to design for time. Bell Labs in the post-war era was a strange place. It was corporate, it was bureaucratic, it was slow, and it was one of the most intellectually fertile environments in human history. You could spend years working on something that might never be visible to the public. No demos, no press, no valuation, just problems. Winslow, working with Lincoln Hawkins and Vincent Lanza, took on polyethylene, a simple polymer, cheap, abundant, promising, and deeply unstable. Left alone, polyethylene degraded. Oxygen attacked it. Heat weakened it. Light accelerated decay. Over time, it fractured at the molecular level. That brittleness was not a surface issue. It was baked into the chemistry. Most teams tried to engineer around this. Thicker coatings, extra layers, protective jackets, more complexity. Winslow went in the opposite direction. He focused on stabilization. Instead of asking how to protect polyethylene from the world, he asked how to change how it interacted with the world. How do you slow down the chemical reactions that cause decay? How do you interrupt oxidation? How do you extend the life of a polymer from a few years to a few decades? This is not glamorous work. It means studying degradation curves, running aging tests, heating samples, cooling samples, exposing them to light, breaking them, repeating over and over. What his team discovered was that tiny additions of stabilizing compounds could dramatically alter behavior. Antioxidants, UV inhibitors, chemical buffers, small tweaks that changed how the polymer responded to stress. Instead of slowly unraveling, it stayed intact. Instead of becoming brittle, it stayed flexible. The insight was simple, the execution was brutal. Because every additive affected manufacturing, affected cost, affected durability, affected scalability. You could not just make something that worked in a lab. You had to make something that could be produced by the mile, installed underground, survive storms, and still function 20 years later. Eventually, they cracked it. They created a stabilized polyethylene sheath that could survive temperature swings, moisture, sunlight, and time. Suddenly, plastic cables were not fragile experiments. They were reliable infrastructure. And that changed everything. The cost of building networks dropped. The weight dropped. Installation accelerated. Maintenance plummeted. Lead disappeared. Environmental damage declined. Expansion became practical. Universal service stopped being a political slogan and started becoming an engineering reality. This was not a consumer-facing breakthrough. No one bought a Field Winslow phone. No one lined up for polymer coatings, but his work made modern telecom economics possible. It is hard to overstate this. The reason you could wire rural America, the reason suburbs could scale, the reason fiber later followed the same conduits, the reason dense urban networks became viable. It all rests on the idea that cables could be lightweight, cheap, and durable. That was his contribution. That's it for another episode of Wealth and Means, advice dressed up like hard work.
We hope you enjoyed the full arc from memes to markets, ancient philosophy to modern polymers, calendars to capital, and dividend debates.
Subscribe, rate, and share this episode. It helps more than you think.
We do this for you to help you have a better week, a sharper mind, and maybe even a longer attention span.
And a special thanks to our sponsor, Nost Moments, because the best investments are still your memories.
Until next time, stay curious.
Stay kind.
And keep compounding.